The first time I discovered my wife was cheating on me, I stood in our kitchen at 2 a.m, clutching her phone like it was the key to unlocking a long-buried truth. The kind of truth that could shatter everything. Evelyn had left the phone on the counter when she went upstairs to shower. The device buzzed once, and the light from the screen flickered in the darkness. The name was enough to make my heart stop. Max. The message preview alone was damning. Still thinking about last weekend. When can we do it again? I didn't immediately react. My hands didn't shake. There was no immediate surge of emotion, no blind rush of anger or betrayal. Instead, a calm, almost clinical thought took over. I was Mark Holloway, 36 years old, an attorney trained to dissect the smallest details, to see through the lies. I had spent years making a career out of finding contradictions in other people's stories. I should have noticed this coming, right? Maybe I had, in the back of my mind, but I had chosen to ignore the signs, as people often do, denying the truth until it's impossible to avoid. I didn't open the message, not yet. Instead, I set the phone back in the same spot where it had been resting, as if nothing had changed. Then I poured myself a drink, a generous 3 fingers of bourbon, and sat down at the kitchen table to think. It was eerily quiet in the house, save for the faint sound of water running through the pipes above my head, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. This was our house, the one we'd bought together 5 years ago before things started to slowly unravel between us. But when had it started? Was it a single defining moment, or was it a gradual erosion of something that once felt unshakable? I couldn't say. Maybe it was like rust slowly eating away at metal, so imperceptible that you don't realize it's happening until it's too late. Evelyn came downstairs about 20 minutes later, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing the silk robe I had bought her for Christmas. She looked beautiful, too beautiful, and that made it worse. The sight of her felt like a cruel reminder of everything that was slipping through my fingers. "You're still up," she said, glancing at the half-empty glass of bourbon in my hand. There was an odd, almost rehearsed tone to her voice, but I said nothing. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, keeping my voice even. She didn't say anything more but picked up her phone without looking at me, her thumb moving rapidly across the screen, probably deleting messages, or perhaps just checking to see if I had noticed anything. "Long day tomorrow?" she asked, her eyes still fixed on the phone, as if it were more important than the man standing right in front of her. "Always is," I answered, the words feeling like they came from someone else, someone who had already stopped caring. She kissed the top of my head, a gesture so mechanical that it felt more like an obligation than affection, then turned and headed back upstairs. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the soft thud of our bedroom door closing behind her. I sat in the silence, finishing my drink, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The next morning, I began my investigation. I wasn't about to be reckless. I wasn't about to confront her without evidence, not when I had spent years learning how to handle people's lies and omissions. So I started compiling the facts. I created a folder on my computer, labeling it Research. It was password protected. Inside, I began to gather the pieces of the puzzle. They weren't admissible in court yet, but they told a story. Evelyn's credit card statements were the first clues. There were charges for things I didn't recognize, restaurants I had never heard of, and a hotel in Miami that I knew for a fact she hadn't mentioned. She had claimed to be at a conference in Atlanta that weekend. There were jewelry purchases from stores I knew didn't match anything in her closet. Then there were her phone records, hours of calls to one number, Max's number. A little digging revealed who he was, Max Emerson, 37, a college professor at the state university. He and Evelyn had been classmates, I learned, from old yearbooks that I found tucked away in the back of the closet. They had reconnected at a reunion 6 months ago. 6 months, half a year of lies. But I didn't act immediately. Not yet. Confronting her would be an emotional reaction, and I wasn't an emotional man. I was a strategist, and I needed to gather all the facts before I made my move. Evelyn had gotten careless, or maybe she thought I was too stupid to figure it out. One evening, I checked our joint bank account and found a charge for $5,000. When I asked her about it, she barely looked up from her laptop. "Girls' trip to Miami," she said. "You make enough, Mark. Don't be petty." Petty. The word hit me like a blow to the chest, and I forced myself to keep my composure. "When was this?" I asked. "Last month," she said, still not looking up. "I told you about it." She hadn't told me. I would have remembered. But I nodded, letting it go, adding another note to my growing file. 2 weeks later, I ran into an old law school friend while at the courthouse. He worked for the district attorney's office, and we grabbed coffee. During our conversation, I mentioned needing to track flight records for a client. "Easy," he said. "Just get the credit card number and the airline. They'll give you the passenger manifests if you have the right paperwork." I didn't have the right paperwork, but I had something better: Evelyn's credit cards. That night, while Evelyn was out at what she claimed was a work dinner, I pulled up her travel history. The Miami trip wasn't a girls' weekend. It was a romantic getaway. Evelyn Holloway and Max Emerson had flown together, seated next to each other on a flight to Miami International, with the same hotel reservation and the same return flight. I sat in my home office for hours, staring at the printouts. The evidence was undeniable. She had used our money, my money mostly since I made far more than she did, to fund an affair. It was then that I made my decision, not out of anger, but out of a desire for justice. The next morning I called the credit card company, reporting the card as stolen. I gave them the date of the Miami trip, explained that I had just noticed the fraudulent charges, and filed a police report. Everything was perfectly legal. The card was in both of our names, but I hadn't authorized the charges. 2 days later, detectives showed up at Evelyn's office. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it when she came home that evening. She was pale, her hands trembling. "The police came to my office, Mark," she said. "They asked me about credit card fraud." I looked up from the legal brief I was reading. "What are you talking about?" "Someone reported the card as stolen. They think I used it without authorization." "Did you?" I asked, my voice flat. The question hung in the air. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it, trying again. "It's our card," she said. "How could I steal from us?" "You tell me," I replied, and returned to my reading. She didn't bring it up again that night, but I noticed she'd made all her vacation photos private on social media. Damage control. Over the next few weeks, I watched her squirm. The investigation didn't go anywhere. I made sure of that by dropping the charges after a few days, but the damage was done. Evelyn was rattled. She looked at me differently, as if she was no longer sure of what I knew or what I might do next. Good. Let her wonder. I began tracking Max's movements. He taught 3 classes at the university: Introduction to Philosophy, Ethics in Modern Society, and a graduate seminar on existentialism. The irony was rich: a man teaching ethics while sleeping with another man's wife. Max was predictable. He had office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays, arrived at 8 in the morning, and left by 6. He drove a silver Audi, likely leased, because I couldn't find a purchase record in his name. He lived alone in a condo downtown, went to the gym 3 times a week, and had drinks at the same bar every Friday night. I never approached him, not yet. But I wanted him to know I was watching. Evelyn started acting even stranger. She would jump when her phone buzzed, checking it obsessively and deleting messages immediately after reading them. She stopped asking about my day. We moved through our house like ghosts, passing one another in the hallway, our interactions as cold and lifeless as the walls around us. Then one night, she broke the silence. "Mark, we need to talk." I was in the kitchen, making dinner. Pasta, because it was simple, and I didn't feel like putting in any extra effort. About what? Us, she said, leaning against the door frame, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed anywhere but on me. What about it? I asked. It's not working, she said, her voice quiet but firm. You know it's not working. Is there someone else? I asked, my voice cutting through the tension between us like a blade. She hesitated just for a moment, but it was enough. It was a fraction of a second too long before she shook her head. No. This is about us. We've grown apart. Have we? I asked. Yes, she said, more resolutely now. And I think we should start thinking about separating. There it was. She didn't want to leave me. She wanted me out of the way so she could be with Max without any guilt, without any complications. No, I said, my voice as steady as steel. She blinked. What? I said no. I'm not leaving. This is my house too. If you want a separation, you leave. Her face flushed red. You can't just... I can, I said, cutting her off. And I am. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm making dinner. You're welcome to join me, or not. She left the room, and I heard her footsteps pounding up the stairs, followed by the sound of our bedroom door slamming shut. I finished cooking the pasta, stirring the sauce with mechanical precision, my mind already racing ahead to the next steps. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Evelyn, her back turned toward me, pretending to be asleep. But I wasn't fooled. I had been betrayed. And now, it was my turn to decide how the story would end. Max's profile on the university website was exactly what you'd expect from someone like him. Pretentious, overstuffed with academic jargon about challenging societal norms and questioning ethical frameworks. There was a photo of him, looking thoughtfully into the distance, hand on chin, standing in front of bookshelves that probably cost more than most of his students' textbooks. The tweed jacket he wore was likely an attempt to project intellectual authority, but I could see through the facade. He didn't even need the glasses he wore, something I knew because I had seen him without them at the bar. I started with Max's past. Everyone has something they'd rather keep hidden, something they're ashamed of, and Max was no different. It took me 3 days of digging through public records and social media archives, but eventually, I found it. A DUI from 10 years ago when he was still a graduate student. Not a major deal by itself, but the arrest report was interesting. It mentioned that Max had been verbally abusive to the officer, using language that would make anyone uncomfortable today, especially in the world of academia, where respect and decorum are everything. The arrest report was public record. Anyone could have found it, but no one had, because no one had been looking until now. I created an anonymous email account and sent the report to the university's ethics committee, along with a carefully worded message asking whether someone with a history of aggressive behavior should be teaching courses on ethics and philosophy. I didn't accuse him outright. I simply asked questions. 2 days later, Max was called into a meeting with the department head. I know this because Evelyn came home that evening, slamming doors and tossing her purse onto the couch. Someone's trying to destroy him, she said, pacing the living room, visibly upset. Someone sent this old report to the university. They're investigating him now. I looked up from my laptop. Who's him? She froze for a moment, caught off guard. A colleague. Someone I work with. You don't work at a university, I reminded her, my tone even. She quickly backpedaled. A friend. Someone I know from college. It's just so unfair. I nodded slowly. Yeah, people can be cruel. She stared at me, her mind clearly racing, trying to figure out what I knew, what I suspected, but she couldn't prove anything. Not yet. I'm going to take a bath, she said, before leaving the room. I went back to my laptop, unfazed, and began planning the next move. Max's reputation took a hit, but it wasn't enough to get him fired. The university simply added a note to his file, and life continued as usual. He still had his job, his condo, his silver Audi, and of course, he still had my wife. I wasn't done yet. I had only just begun. The university had a strict zero-tolerance policy when it came to faculty dating students. If a professor was caught in any kind of relationship with a current student, they were immediately terminated. Max, according to his class rosters, taught a graduate seminar with 14 students, 12 women and 2 men. I didn't need to create a scandal. I just needed to plant a seed of suspicion. So, I started showing up at the university around the time Max's classes ended. I would sit in the campus coffee shop with a book, watching students come and go. After a few days, I found what I was looking for. A young woman, mid-20s, who always lingered after class to talk to Max. Their conversation seemed friendly enough, but in the right light, with the right angle, they could easily be interpreted as something more. I took photos. Nothing incriminating, just the two of them talking in his office, visible through the window. Innocent enough. But when combined with an anonymous tip to the ethics committee suggesting an inappropriate relationship, those harmless photos could become something else entirely. The investigation lasted 2 weeks. Max was cleared, of course, because there was nothing substantial to find, but the damage had been done. Students began avoiding him. Colleagues whispered in the hallways. His reputation, already fragile, took another significant blow. Evelyn, on the other hand, was a mess. She started drinking more, coming home late with the scent of wine on her clothes. She stopped pretending to care about our marriage. One night, she didn't come home at all. I knew exactly where she was. A few weeks earlier, I had placed a GPS tracker under the rear bumper of her car. I didn't need to guess. The device showed me exactly where she was, parked outside Max's condo from 10 p.m. until 7 a.m. When she came home the next morning, I was already in the kitchen, calmly sipping coffee and reading the newspaper, as though nothing had changed. "Morning," I said, looking up from my paper. She jumped, startled. "Jesus, Mark, you scared me." "Long night?" I asked, barely masking the edge in my voice. "I stayed at Sophia's," she replied quickly, her usual alibi. "We were working on a project." "Must have been quite a project," I said, my tone flat. "You left at 10 and got back just now." Her face went pale. "Were you checking on me?" "I notice things," I replied. "It's what I do." She grabbed a mug from the cabinet, her hands shaking. "This is getting weird, Mark. You're acting paranoid." "Am I?" I asked, my voice steady. "Or am I just paying attention?" She poured herself a cup of coffee and left the room without saying another word. That afternoon, I went to see Max. I'd been planning this confrontation for weeks, imagining every possible scenario in my head. But when I finally walked into his office during his posted office hours, I realized I didn't need a plan. I didn't need to say much. I just needed to let him know that I knew. He was sitting at his desk, grading papers, when I knocked on the open door. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking up with an air of false politeness. "Max Emerson?" I asked. "That's me." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. His office was small, cramped with bookshelves filled with academic journals. There was a photo on his desk, him and Evelyn at some restaurant, both smiling. He had left it face up, either out of carelessness or arrogance. "My name is Mark Holloway," I said. "I'm Evelyn's husband." He froze. The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated casualness. "I see," he said. "And why are you here?" "Just wanted to meet you," I said, my voice even. "Put a face to the name, you know how it is." "I don't think we have anything to discuss," he said, trying to dismiss me. "No?" I sat down in the chair across from his desk, uninvited. "I think we have plenty to discuss. Like how you've been sleeping with my wife. Like how you've been using our money to take her on trips. Like how you think you're going to walk away from this without consequences." His jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," I said. "You're a smart guy, Max. Philosophy professor, expert in ethics. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He stood up suddenly. I think you should leave. In a minute, I said, not moving. First, I want you to understand something. I know everything. The texts, the phone calls, the Miami trip, the nights at your condo, all of it. And I've been very patient. But my patience has limits. Are you threatening me? He asked, his voice tight. Threatening? I smirked. No. I'm just explaining the situation. See, you've built a nice life here. Tenure track position, respect from your colleagues, a decent salary. But reputations are fragile. They can be destroyed by rumors, by accusations, by unfortunate coincidences. You've already had a taste of that. His face went from pale to red. That was you. I smiled. I'm just a concerned citizen. But here's the thing, Max. What you've experienced so far, that's nothing. That's me being gentle. If you don't end things with Evelyn, if you don't walk away right now, I will destroy you. Not physically, nothing illegal. But I will make sure that every aspect of your life falls apart. Your job, your reputation, your finances, everything. Do you understand? He was shaking now, gripping the edge of his desk with white knuckles. You can't do that. Can I? I stood up and walked to the door. I'm an attorney, Max. I know exactly what I can and can't do, and trust me, I can do a lot without crossing any lines. I opened the door and paused, glancing back at him. Oh, and one more thing. Evelyn thinks she's in love with you, but she's not. She's just bored and you're available. When things get hard, and they will, she'll throw you under the bus to save herself. Keep that in mind. I left him standing there, his face a mask of fury and fear, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. That night, Evelyn called me, hysterical. What did you do? She screamed. What did you say to him? To who? I asked, my voice calm. You know who. Max called me. He said you went to his office. He said you threatened him. I didn't threaten anyone, I said. I just had a conversation. This is insane, Mark. You're insane. Am I? I replied. Or am I just tired of being treated like an idiot? There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then a sound that might have been a sob. I want a divorce. Then file for one, I said, my voice as cold as ice. But you're not getting a penny, and neither is he. I hung up the phone and poured myself another drink. Evelyn moved out 3 days after I served her the divorce papers. The woman who had once promised to spend the rest of her life with me packed up 2 suitcases in a hurry and left without so much as a word. She didn't even bother to face me when she did it. Her things, her clothes, her personal items were all that went. She left everything else behind, even her wedding ring, which she placed on the kitchen counter next to a note that simply said, I'm sorry. Sorry. That word, with its hollow, desperate weight, seemed like such an inadequate attempt to repair the damage she'd caused. As if 6 months of lies, deceit, and betrayal could be undone by a single word scribbled on a scrap of paper. I stared at the note for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of the finality of it all. It wasn't just the act of leaving. It was everything that had led up to that moment, the sheer audacity of her choices. She was sorry? Well, that didn't cut it. I knew where she was. Evelyn moved in with Max. My wife, the woman I'd spent years with, was now sharing a bed with the man who'd stolen her heart and my trust. It didn't take long to figure that out. The tracker I had placed on her car told me everything. I saw it parked at his condo for 3 days straight, as if they were finally able to breathe in the freedom they had stolen from me. I imagined them sitting in that condo, holding hands, exchanging sweet words about how they had done the right thing, how they were finally free to love each other, as though their actions hadn't shattered everything I held dear. It was almost poetic, but it wasn't surprising. Not to me. Nothing about this was surprising. It was predictable. It was the inevitable outcome of a series of choices made by 2 selfish people. I had seen it coming the entire time, though I never expected it to feel as hollow as it did. I'd been warned that the truth would hurt. I didn't realize that the real sting would come not from the betrayal itself, but from the ease with which they'd thrown me aside. I gave them a week to settle in before I made my next move. I wasn't about to be rash. I wanted everything to fall perfectly into place. If I had learned anything from this mess, it was that precision was key. A hasty decision could backfire, so I bided my time. Max's condo was in a building with assigned parking spaces. One space, number 42, was specifically assigned to him. But Evelyn's car. It had been parked in the guest parking, and guest parking had a strict 72-hour limit before cars were towed. I knew exactly what I needed to do. On the fourth day, I called the towing company. That evening, Evelyn called me in a rage, demanding to know if I was behind the towing of her car. "Why would I tow your car?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "I didn't even know where you were." "Liar," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You're the one who left," I reminded her, my voice steady, emotionless. "You're the one who moved in with your boyfriend. Don't blame me for the consequences of your choices." She hung up on me, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The games had only just started. I took my time with the divorce papers. I wanted them to be perfect. I wanted every asset accounted for, every joint account frozen, and every credit card canceled. I wasn't about to let her walk away with a single thing that wasn't rightfully mine. She had already taken enough from me. Now, I would take everything back. My lawyer, Patricia, had been handling divorce cases for years. When I presented her with my evidence file, she was impressed, though not exactly pleased. "This is thorough," she said, flipping through the stack of documents. "Very thorough." "I'm detail-oriented," I replied coolly, feeling no need to explain myself further. "Mark," she said, glancing at me over her glasses, "with this kind of evidence, we can prove adultery. In this state, that affects asset division. You'll likely keep the house, the savings, probably even her retirement account." "Good," I replied, feeling a small flicker of satisfaction. "But," she continued, a slight hesitation in her voice, "you need to be careful. If you do anything that could be perceived as harassment or intimidation, it could hurt your case." "I'm not harassing anyone," I said, my voice cold. "I'm just living my life." Patricia didn't look convinced, but she agreed to take the case. The divorce summons was served at Evelyn's office. A process server delivered the papers during one of her team meetings. The timing couldn't have been better. Pure coincidence, but satisfying all the same. When Evelyn called that night, her voice was trembling with rage, barely able to contain her anger. "You had me served at work? In front of everyone?" she demanded. "That's where you work," I said flatly. "Where else would they serve you?" "You're trying to humiliate me," she accused, her words sharp. "No, Evelyn, I'm just divorcing you. If you feel humiliated, that's your own guilt talking," I replied, unaffected. Max's life, meanwhile, was slowly but surely falling apart. The damage to his reputation from the university investigation was just the beginning. It wasn't the formal investigation that hurt him. It was the whispers, the anonymous online reviews from disgruntled students who claimed he was unprofessional and biased. They were completely within their rights to do so. His performance in the classroom had declined, and enrollment in his classes had dropped dramatically. His department head called him in for another meeting. His numbers were down. The graduate seminar that had once had a waiting list now had only 5 students enrolled. Max's career was crumbling, but he didn't seem to realize how deeply he had been affected. He was living in his little bubble with Evelyn, oblivious to the storm that had been brewing around him. Evelyn tried to guilt me during our mandatory meetings with the divorce mediator. She was attempting to paint Max as a victim in all of this, trying to convince me that I was the one who had destroyed his life. "You're destroying him," she said, her voice laced with desperation. "For what? Because he fell in love with me? No, I said calmly, letting the words sink in. Because he helped you steal from me. Because he knew you were married and didn't care. Because he thought he could get away with it. The mediator, a weary man in his 50s, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Let's focus on the division of assets. There are no assets to divide, I interjected. The house is in my name. The savings account is mine. She contributed nothing. That's not true, Evelyn shouted, her face flushed with anger. I worked. I earned money. Which you spent on vacations with him, I said, gesturing toward the door, as if Max were standing there. I have the receipts, Evelyn. All of them. She broke down into tears. The mediator shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. I felt nothing. The mediation failed, and we ended up in court. The trial was brutal. Patricia laid out the evidence systematically, as if she had been preparing for this moment for years. The affair, the stolen credit cards, the joint account withdrawals. She presented flight records, hotel receipts, phone logs, everything that painted Evelyn as a cheater, a liar, and a thief. Evelyn's lawyer tried to argue that the marriage had already been failing, that she had been emotionally abandoned, and that she deserved half of everything because that was what the law dictated. The judge didn't buy it. He awarded me the house, the savings, and the retirement accounts. Evelyn received her car and personal belongings. That was it. Nothing more. She left the courtroom crying. I left with my head held high, knowing that I had won. But I wasn't done. 3 weeks later, Max lost his job. The university didn't renew his contract, citing performance issues and declining student satisfaction. Max tried to fight it, filing complaints with the faculty union, but it was too late. His reputation was already ruined. No other university would touch him. Evelyn tried to stick with him, but I knew it wouldn't last. I still had access to her credit card statements, something she never thought to change. I saw the charges at cheap restaurants, the bills from discount grocery stores. They were struggling, and it brought me a grim sense of satisfaction. Good. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into them at a coffee shop downtown. They were sitting at a corner table, arguing in hushed voices. Evelyn looked older than her 34 years, tired and worn out. Max looked defeated. All the confidence he once exuded had been stripped away, leaving behind a shell of the man he had been. I got my coffee and walked past their table without saying a word. But as I reached the door, I turned back. Evelyn, I said, my voice cold. She looked up, startled, and Max stiffened. I just wanted to say thank you, I said. You taught me an important lesson, about trust, about loyalty, about what people are really worth. Mark, she started, but I cut her off. I hope it was worth it, I said, my voice steady, almost amused. I really do. I left before she could respond. That night, I sat in my house, not ours anymore, and poured myself a drink. The place felt emptier without her things cluttering up the space. It felt cleaner, better. I thought about revenge, about justice, about whether I had gone too far. But every time I began to feel guilty, I remembered standing in that kitchen at 2 a.m, holding her phone, reading that message from Max. No, I hadn't gone too far. I had gone exactly as far as I needed to. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that Evelyn and Max had broken up. She had moved back in with her parents, and he had relocated to another state, attempting to rebuild his career. They had destroyed each other, just like I knew they would. I sold the house and moved to a different city. I started fresh. I met new people, dated occasionally, though I was careful now. Cautious. I'd learned my lesson. Some nights when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about Evelyn, about the woman I had married, the woman I had once thought I knew. I wondered if she thought about me, if she regretted what she'd done, if she understood why I did what I did. Probably not. People like Evelyn never really understand. They just move on to the next thing, the next person, the next lie. But I understood. And that was enough. I won. Not because I destroyed them, though I had, I won because I survived, because I took the worst thing that had ever happened to me and turned it into fuel, because I refused to be a victim. And if that made me the villain in their story, so be it. I could live with that.